All right, the following will be a brief talk on firearm safety. So normally, I tend to agree with the federal laws surrounding prohibiting firearms, and then additional protections from the state on top of that is just based on culture. So it's something that you have to think about based on things like demographics. So that could be race, religion. It could be things like population density. It could be things like culture of sports shooting or hunting. It could be things like IQ or income level or stratifications of jobs or even unemployment rates or violent instances of crime or crime incidents reporting or guns and drugs. That's the right state statute for additional protections on top of federal protections. But to make a long story short, one of the reasons I like substances being prohibited for personal use is one, they're really addictive, and normally the arbitrary discretion of the prosecuting office and the DEA or defense attorneys and people like myself or judges allows compassion for those types of people or whatever. But when that type of cannabis or anything else is prohibited for possession, if the person has a firearm and they're using drugs unsafely and they can't shoot safely, or if they're involved in a criminal underground, it gives ATF the ability to confiscate and seize the weapon and charge the person accordingly pretty easily. So that's one reason why I like cannabis being prohibited, and it's up to people to kind of make cannabis more like alcohol. But the danger is, once cannabis is not being associated with the criminal underground or criminal enterprises or things like that, the danger is basically not shooting safely, and it's something I talk about in other videos with gross motor function and fine motor function and reaction times. Cannabis dramatically slows those things, and I don't normally like to see people that use cannabis medicinally or recreationally in excess carry a firearm. If they want to come to the range to shoot, I'll teach them like safe shooting practices, but I'd rather not see those people carry firearms. And the thing with alcohol is typically in American culture, if you drink alcohol in excess, you're going to get a DUI, and DUIs are normally felony offenses. So with your first DUI, typically federally you become a prohibited person because you're proving to the public that you can't drink safely. So say you've never had a DUI and by some miracle you walk to work or something, and your alcohol use is not, negatively affected with a bar fight or an aggravated assault or anything like that. And what you have is a person who's inebriated all the time. What you have a person who's intoxicated all the time. What you have is a person whose use is problematic to the point that they have a difficult time walking, a difficult time, functioning physically because the amount of, habitual problematic use or just, at that point it would be kind of medicinal use if the person had trauma they weren't addressing or something like that, or cultural difference if you look at the indigenous people. So the issue becomes, do you trust that person to carry a firearm? And with mass shootings, the thing would be, okay, well, it's basically like the guy now has a muzzle loader because he's so inebriated he can't even shoot straight at 20 feet, let alone 200 yards. So that's one point. The DUI and safety and stuff like that is kind of the other point. So typically speaking, in American culture, it's not, necessary to kind of have that ability to be able to seize a weapon or prohibit a person or kind of sanction them accordingly, because the culture surrounding alcohol is dramatically kind of different when it comes to criminal underground. Because if you smoke cannabis, normally you're associated with other types of unsafe drug use or distribution. But if you drink alcohol, not always the case. And normally if your alcohol use is problematic, you'll probably have a aggravated assault or drunken disorderly if you're doing those types of behavior, very similar to things like drug conspiracy charges and larceny and white-collar crimes and stuff that go along with being able to afford substances that are much more expensive. But to make a long story short, if the person's so inebriated they can't shoot safe, like really what you're worried about is them with a knife or a muzzle loader. And most of the time the person would become prohibited because of the problematic use in American culture, because of driving or because of, a unfortunate event at a bar or something like that. So it's reasons why you don't need additional protections to be able to seize a weapon or prohibit a person or sanction them accordingly after the fact if the person possesses a legal firearm with legal paperwork and then becomes an alcoholic or someone with severe alcohol use disorder.